Hello, and thank you for checking out Value Driven Life. I am your host, Coach Chris McMahon, and I am very excited to get to sit down and talk with Stephanie Roth-Goldberg today. Stephanie, thank you for being here, and I would love it if you could just give a little bit of an introduction of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Stephanie Roth-Goldberg, as you said. I am a psychotherapist in New York City and New Jersey. I specialize in eating disorders within the athletic population. Um, so I work with a lot of endurance athletes, and I work with a lot of folks who may not have a diagnosable eating disorder, but who are struggling in their relationship with food and or body image, and either want to incorporate some exercise and don't really know how to have a healthy relationship with that, or they have an unhealthy relationship with exercise and want to sort of figure out how to untangle from that. So that's the
Uh,
short version.
I love that version. The long version could probably be a podcast in and of itself because there's just so much that goes into that, the type of work that you're doing every single day. For folks who want to follow you on social media, I believe, what is your handle? I can't remember it off the top of my head because you just post such great stuff on there.
Thank you. Um, my handle is Embodied Psychotherapist.
Yes, yes. So I think the thing that stands out to me is, at least from my experience working in health and fitness for like over a decade now, the disordered relationship between what we deem as fit, what we deem as healthy, and finding a balance between the two. And I'm not even really sure how someone begins to unravel that. Like for
Mm,
me, the listeners of the podcast probably heard me talk about this before, but either way, for me, being in health and fitness, I got into it in college because I basically was told I had to look a certain way for. I was an actor and I was going to school for
mm,
theater, and I got cast in a particular role. And at the time, I was 5'10" and I weighed 119 pounds. And they told me that I had to go exercise and look intimidating and look a specific way. And I did that. And it was probably one of the best things I did for myself because at the time I was ready for that sort of change, I guess. I was a very late bloomer. I was bullied in high school because I was in a I was I say I have been privileged, but also being in a smaller body and being technically weaker than kids who are younger than me, I was bullied for that. And for me, it kind of helped me have this new level of confidence. But then when I started to work in health and fitness, it became that's all I did all the time. I worked out. I tried the latest diet because it was supposed to be the thing that would make me X or Y, whatever that is,
mhm,
fill in the blank. And then standing in the back room, I saw now I can realize a lot of disordered behaviors from trainers. There are two moments that stand out to me. One
mm,
was a trainer came up to me. He was walking on the floor and he came in from going to Whole Foods because we worked below a Whole Foods. It was really nice setup actually. And I was in the middle of a workout and he came on the floor and he had a bag and I could tell that it had cookies in it, like cookies from upstairs because
mm.
they have such amazing baked cookies. And across the floor, like looking at it, I was like, "Hey, what kind of cookies are those? I'm so hungry. Like what kind of cookie?" And I just got the dirtiest look. And then when I was walking to the back of the gym, this trainer pulled me aside and said, "Don't you ever effing do that to me again." I was like, "Do what?" I was like 20, I was 22 at the time, 23. And he was like, "You can't let them know that we eat cookies, that I eat cookies, because that's not what they should be doing." And it was so intense and they were
Oh,
just so
wow.
angry. And I was like, "Oh, okay, I guess I mean, I like cookies, I'm type 1 diabetic, so I don't eat them all the time, but they're good. They seem okay." And that was when I was like, all right, maybe we're not supposed to talk about those things. And then another time I
Mhm,
was eating chicken, a rotisserie chicken from upstairs at Whole Foods, and one of the trainers told me that I had to take all the skin off of it if I wanted to be healthy because the skin has fat in it. And I was like, another trainer told me I shouldn't eat peanut butter after my workout because that's delaying my body's ability to absorb protein. And really, so there are all these things that while yeah, maybe technically science-based. Yeah, there's fat in this, there's fat in that, X or Y. But I'm not a figure competitor. I'm just a regular person. My job doesn't depend on me looking a specific way, but here are these things that get put into people's heads. And I'm someone who's supposed to help someone also. So then we speak. So it's like this cycle. So Stephanie, I guess my question is, where does someone even begin to be able to recognize or separate or start to heal that sort of relationship that we're developing with ourselves? While technically we might also be trying to better ourselves by going and moving our body, which doesn't necessarily need to have a label as trying to gain weight or lose weight. It's just if you want to do purposeful movement.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting because in both those stories, particularly the cookie story, right? There's like so much shame involved in that. Like it's a secret to eat something. And so what's interesting is it sounds like you recognize it in the moment. And like that's how we start to do things. Like we have those moments of, oh, this doesn't feel right. And this is easier as an adult than perhaps at 22 and even younger than that, right? To say like, oh, but why can't they know you're eating cookies and like really explore it with someone or just decide like, oh, well, I'm not subscribing to that. I'm okay if my clients know I eat cookies. Um, but I think it comes with the recognition of how people have such a secret life around food, particularly in the fitness industry. I have worked in and around the fitness industry. When I was in grad school in particular, but I've been around gyms for a very long time. And I think that's often true that what you hear people saying on the training floor and then what they do sort of in the back room is two totally different things. Um, but so I think, beginning to say, like, I don't need to have this be a secret. And very slowly, I think the world is changing a little bit where there are some more diverse looking bodies who are trainers and gyms are hiring more diverse looking bodies, hopefully. Um, and so I think that automatically can begin to change or challenge our ideas of like what fitness is. Um, One of the things I always say that you have to start with is divorcing the idea that like to become fit, you need to eat a certain way. Like you have to divorce food from exercise to have a healthy relationship with either. Um, and it takes a lot of untangling from exactly what you're saying, from these ideas that we learn and we hear. Your story reminds me of being on a gym floor once and hearing a trainer tell their client, like, oh, well, you can't do this lift because you had too much sugar in your shake this morning. Like I told you not to put so much fruit in there. And I was like, oh my God. And to the point where I've always been this kind of person though. I like walked up and I was like, that has nothing to do with why you can't do the lift. Like, and I said to the trainer, I'm like, oh, did you get a master's in nutrition since the last time we spoke? Because that is so inaccurate. But people really believe this because this is a fitness professional. They're going to you for a service. Um, and I also think that part of the problem is people don't stay in their lane, quote unquote. Like when you're trained as a personal trainer, you're not actually trained as a nutritionist. Um, and so I think that's another thing that sort of in the gyms that has to start from the, top down though, of like allowing, like really telling people what their job is and to stick in their, stay in their lane.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was interviewing another guest and we were kind of talking about this in one way or another, which was kind of like you have to be, at least from the nutrition standpoint of the way I work with clients, you have to be nutritionally agnostic. You can't have a belief that your thing is going to solve or fix or is the answer for everyone. Everyone's relationship, past experiences are going to be completely different. And in the same way that in your practice, you probably have so many tools that you can use, but they're probably not every single tool isn't for every single person, or
Right.
maybe you try and it doesn't work, right? It's unfortunate that that sort of mentality of okay, I got
Mhm.
this wrong. Let me go learn why it's wrong. It's okay to be wrong and okay to learn a little bit more. Like the trainer in your example, my hope is when you explain that to them, it made them be curious and say, why why is this probably not the best thing I should be saying? How can I foster a better relationship to one, put the client first so they feel capable, feel empowered. Maybe we explain why it's not actually the sugar, it's the fact that you ate the sugar because you were up super late last night with your two kids who had a fever. Okay, you're eating the sugar not because you're doing anything wrong, just literally you're trying to stay awake. Like I
Right.
completely understand that. Let's do some rowing intervals. Let's do a lift that's a little bit easier today, but you can knock out of the park and feel empowered in your body. That's kind of how I like to look
Mhm.
at training. It's just so hard for everyone to approach things from this black or white like thinking, and it's very dogmatic and doesn't help. Where our goal is to help, just like your goal is to help. Like I don't know, it's just messy. I like to say I exist in the messy middle of nutrition
Mhm.
because that's really what it is. Like someone could come to me and want to lose weight, and we can do intentional practices, but we're not going to do I'm not going to get anyone down to 5% body fat because I personally don't believe those practices, unless your job depends on it, and unless you are a mature enough human being to understand that literally your worth isn't attached to getting that 5% mark, then maybe, but even still, I don't feel comfortable doing that with someone. I'd rather someone be able to approach this with health promoting behaviors, and also we sprinkle extra awareness on why maybe this is coming into play or why maybe this is coming into play, as opposed to saying like you're wrong if your macros aren't like spot on, like x or y. Like it's not a healthy, truly health promoting thing, you know. Yeah, I don't know, it's a big conversation.
Right. Well, because I think what the fitness industry gets wrong a lot is when they talk about health promoting behaviors, they leave out mental health. So, and we know, and research shows this over and over again, right? Like being on a rigid diet is the fastest way to an eating disorder. Like the statistics of people who have eating disorders, it shows that it often began with the diet, right? And so, if we think about health, sort of holistically or like as a global thing, mental health is part of health. So being on a rigid diet and not being able to be flexible or eat at a restaurant or, eat things that you enjoy, then you're not really having health promoting behaviors. You're just being restrictive and you're thinking of, I think what gets conflated all the time is like thinness and fitness are not actually health. That's not how health is defined.
No, no, it's not, and I really love, Stephanie, that you're bringing this up, this idea of, like, I for me, what I define as, like, a health promoting behavior is, like, going for a daily walk. It's
Right.
it's it's developing self-compassion and awareness with yourself to understand. I say this all the time, is, like, you have to be a human and not a robot. You have to understand that whatever you're doing is actually meant to, enhance what you want to enjoy in life. It's not meant to make you feel like I can't participate, I can't be a part of this, I can't look at this menu, I can't. What you're doing and what a lot of us in the beginning do when we're first learning, because we don't know more and then maybe we don't do the research, is we practice the art of subtraction. If I take this away, technically calories in, calories out, someone will lose weight if we want to just blanket statement. But while that is true, a calorie deficit helps someone lose weight. If emotionally and mentally they aren't prepared for those things and we're not guiding them to make choices that actually help them thrive and feel good and want to participate in these things, want to move their body in a way that makes them feel good in their body, then it does not matter. Practicing adding things in
Mhm.
is going to make someone thrive. That's what we have to look at. Like, what do I add in? How is this add? How can we take this from being in a negative point to being in a positive point? It's a really interesting dynamic.
Right. I was just talking to a doctor at a very well-known hospital in the city yesterday about how they are talking to the cancer patients they serve about diets. And we were talking about, what if instead of saying eat less of this, you said eat more, whatever, fruits and vegetables. Uh, because also, like as you're saying, that comes from a place of empowerment. Oh, I can add something. I'm doing something right, as opposed to, oops, I ate this thing I'm supposed to not, or I'm supposed to be eating less of, and now I've done something wrong. So it like begins again, like a shame, sort of guilt relationship to food and or one's body. So I think that's a great practice to think about, like, what can you add in? The other thing that, it's in terms of getting people to want to have mindful movement, is that you have to then put movement, and I said this in a few different ways already, like separate from what you look like, right? It's like I always say, you've probably seen me say this on Instagram, even, like athletics and aesthetics are two completely different things. Um, and so I think that's the other like thing that trainers can really focus on, is like, does this person want to get stronger? Do they want to have more endurance? They want to get faster? Because then, of course, we know a calorie deficit will not help them do those things.
Yeah, yeah, that's really important. Like reflecting back on what the person actually wants versus what they're actually saying. And it's really funny when I was doing this interview with this particular guest, we were talking about that too. It's like the goal as a coach is to tell everyone what the cost of what they want to do will be.
Mhm.
As in, here's what goes into what you're actually saying. You came and you said you wanted to be ready for, let's use the example that everyone will use right now. You say you want to be ready for when you go on vacation and you're on the beach. If I'm working with a gentleman, he might say, I want a six pack. Other female might say, I really want my upper body to be toned. Here's X or Y. And yeah, we could lift weights, but technically if you're lifting weights and if you're at a certain size already, like you're probably going to need to eat a little bit more than you actually think you should be eating. Dieting down, maybe you could, but you're not going to be able to sustain that. And then you're going to go on vacation and you're going to eat because you're on vacation and you should be enjoying yourself. And you're going to come back and it's going to be this long cycle where it's like, I just want to get, if I just get back to this weight, then I will feel like I'm succeeding. I will feel like I'm better if I see this number. And in reality, what it is, no, it's like a range. Like, no, it's based off how you're feeling. It's based off all these other markers. It's based off so many other things than that one metric alone. And I guess it's a more mature way to look at things than a lot of folks will sometimes because it does require a lot more work than just saying, sure, calories in, calories out. That it's just this part of it. It's so nuanced. Um, yeah.
Well, and I think exploring, so I always say this to people too, like a metric such as weight is an external goal, right? Like it's an extrinsic measure, it's external. What are your intrinsic reasons for wanting to do basically anything? Um, because those are the measures also that you have access to more regularly. So, like, we know that exercise is mood boosting. So, if you want to feel a little more energized, you can have that measure after every single, whether it's just like a slow walk outside and you got refreshed from the air. If you did, some sort of more intense exercise that release serotonin in your brain, whatever it is, like that's a measure that's accessible every single time. Um, and I think those are also really important things. Like, you want to be on vacation and enjoy yourself. So if you're focused on your weight, that takes you away from being present on your vacation.
Yeah, and kind of like what you were saying, the way when I work with a lot of clients, we do work on the other things, the things that people are more traditional and recognize. But the other side of that is we do a lot of work on values. We do a lot of work on like what's actually important, and kind of like what you're talking, we have the most extrinsic and then we have the most intrinsic. Like it's most people don't most people, their entry point will be this outcome based goal. It
Mhm.
just will be. It's everyone's. And I try my hardest because now I'm aware of this sort of thing to be like, cool, that's your entry point. Excellent. Like it's very hard. And maybe we could talk about this too. It's very hard because sometimes there's the pendulum. Like I say, I exist in the messy middle because there's this pendulum. There's this one side of the aisle that says, okay, yeah, the only way to get to look a specific way is if you do X, Y, or Z, and if you only eat clean, and if you do all these things, right? It completely. And then there's the really really far end of the spectrum that says, well, if you want to lose weight, or if you want to start working out, these are extremes of the. Then you shouldn't want to do that. You should feel bad about it. You should like there's just these two
Right.
ends of the extreme, right? And
Right.
because I know that you're not the diet culture, and I know technically, even though intuitive eating and everything could be lumped in with total anti-diet, it sounds to me like what you're saying is like, no, we just want to find a place where we can exist in a healthy body, how we're describing what health is for that body. It's not everybody has a different body. Like it's not the same
Right.
thing.
Right. And I really am anti-diet culture, but you know what? It's difficult when you work with athletes to say that food really doesn't matter. And again, like I work with primarily endurance athletes just because that I am an endurance athlete. So I tend to know more people in that world. But I actually have done a figure competition many years ago. Um, it is so toxic. I mean, probably almost 20 years ago at this point. But if if you think about it like that, like you can be an intuitive eater and you can be anti-diet and then still need to know and take care of your needs within your sport. And that's where I try to exist, which is like sort of the idea behind intuitive eating is really knowing your body and your needs and learning to take care of it intuitively. Um, but of course, so for example, like when I run a marathon, I'm not I don't want to eat gels every 45 minutes. They're gross, but I got to do it. And so therefore you say diet does matter, right? Like it does. I want to finish this thing. I have a goal, whatever. But so yeah, I like that messy middle idea.
Yeah, maybe you could speak a little bit more about this because I've never encountered, in my experience, I've never encountered someone who kind of toes the line of, yeah, I am an intuitive, I do teach intuitive eating. It is a part of my practice, but at the same time, I do have these physical goals, these aesthetic goals, these things that I'm aware of the science behind what would help me excel at whatever this goal is. Do you find it sometimes hard, or even when you first got started in this realm, find it hard to understand like both sides, how they can coexist together, whether it be the science of what's going to help me and the intuitive based side of what's going to help me? Because I feel like intuitive eating is it is advanced to some degree if you are doing it in the realm of what you're doing, which is like sports and doing it. It's like
Right.
it's such a high skill level.
Right. Well, and you know what's interesting is one of the founders of intuitive eating actually was an athlete. She ran an Olympic trial marathon many years, but you know, before she discovered intuitive eating. But so I actually worked with her individually when I started out, and I said, you know, I really want to practice intuitive eating. I'm certified in it, but I work with athletes, and like this, in some ways, I don't get it. You know, how do we marry these two things? And a lot of it is based on, you know, when you're exercising or when you're about to exercise, let's say that's where what you're talking about, the science really is important. You need a certain amount of carbohydrates, you need a certain amount of protein, or, you know, easy digesting carbohydrates versus more complex, you know, those ideas. But then where the intuitive eating comes into play is, let's say after a training session, you feel really depleted. It's like checking in about that and then learning, like, oh, okay, what do I want to eat? How do I feel afterwards? And allowing yourself, like, oh, okay, I really want a burger, then eat the burger. Like your body is telling you probably that you need all of the things that a burger gives us, right? Some iron, some fat, and it tastes good, right? Like, so I think that's where the intuitive eating component really comes in, is learning to listen to your body and then not restricting after periods of your active exercise.
Mm. Okay, so uh, this is really cool to hear because what I'm hearing you say, Stephanie, is like in how I'm interpreting it is okay. Because maybe if I'm and let's keep with endurance because that's technically where in my mind you might see a lot of you could very easily see some disordered behavior because if I'm at a certain size, then my mile time is going to stay at the time I need it to be, as opposed to if I gain, let's say, I have it in my head, I'll gain like 5 pounds if I eat X or Y. If I eat the bun and I don't get a lettuce bun, then I'm going to,
Right.
even though I've been running for like, even though I've done like 50 miles this week and I've also walked on top of that, and I'm also, maybe I'm a teacher and I'm walking, right? So that's where I see that could start to happen. What you're saying is like to be able to heal it enough so that you can recognize like, oh no, technically the carbs are going to be really good for me right now. The protein is there. It tastes really good. I'm going to enjoy this. It's going to only help me be able to perform better. Because I
Well,
think
and those
someone,
5
yeah.
pounds might help you too, right? That's the
Oh,
thing
yeah.
that I think that's the deconstructing that is so challenging, is that, like, actually you might gain weight and even increase your mile time. You just have to try. And so a lot of times actually with athletes, it's best to start intuitive eating outside of a training cycle so that you can really allow yourself to explore and be more flexible than, like, oh, I have whatever, a strength competition in 3 weeks or a race in 3 weeks. So that's also sort of a rule of thumb for athletes. Start, because you're right, those fixed ideas of like what you weigh has such an outcome on how fast you run or bike or whatever. Oftentimes they're not right. Like, you could get faster with more energy,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. What no, it makes 1000% sense in my mind to be like, if I have enough energy to be able to have enough glycogen within my muscles so I can actually do this endurance-based activity, it makes total sense to me, but I'm not someone who's competing. I have done that. I've run ultra marathons. I've done long bike rides, and I'm aware of that, but I also don't have the same relationship with it that someone else who might be running like an
Right.
Olympic trial might be like, no, like I have, so it's such an interesting concept. So one side of this uh, conversation we're having in my mind is someone listening to this, let's say they are a trainer, and let's say they're a huge proponent of intuitive eating, and they say, okay, so what you're saying is if the person finishes running and they go, you know what, I'm in the mood for a box of Pop Tarts, like that's the first thing that I've heard people say, and I know that's not what everyone's going to do, especially if they're an athlete. They probably are more aware to be like, I probably shouldn't eat a whole box of Pop Tarts right now, even though I'm really they could have a Pop Tart. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
how do you begin to explain that to someone who says, well, so you're saying someone should just go for whatever they want, or should they be aware of the choices they're making? Like, how do you begin uh, that sort of dialogue?
Well, so I would say go eat the Pop Tarts and tell me how you feel afterwards. Like, you eat a box of Pop Tarts. How does it make your body feel? How do you feel the rest of the day? And if you've eaten the whole box, you probably have now really satisfied that craving. And you may not want Pop Tarts tomorrow. You may, and that's okay. But again, like, intuitive eating is also this idea of gentle nutrition. So if I ate a box of Pop Tarts, I imagine my stomach would really hurt. And therefore, even if I had the taste desire for it the next time, I would know, like, last time that really gave me a stomach ache. So I'm going to have a little of this and see how I feel. Um, but it does start with full allowance of just like, yeah, go eat whatever you want and see what feels good, what doesn't. There's also research that shows, when you were saying mindful movement, in terms of mindful eating, your taste buds diminish over time when you're satisfied. So, like, during each meal. So, if you eat Pop Tarts and they're really delicious and you're really enjoying them, awesome. And then if you're mindful, at a certain point, they're not going to actually taste as good. And that's where that's the other piece of it, is like, oh, learning what satisfaction is.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you brought that up because this is the problem that you run into or I've run into with certain clients. I never tell someone they can't eat something. Like, I've never said that. I've had it said to me, and it is the most detrimental thing to making any sort of progress, however you're defining it. It makes you eat in shame. It makes you, you know, also being a type 1 diabetic, it's like
Mm,
I've learned so much. I'm already hyper aware of carbohydrate intake. Like, there are so many things layered on top of that with my specific life that when I went super paleo when I was about 23, 24 because
mhm,
someone at the gym gave me a book and they're like, "You should read this." And I read it and I was like, "Okay, we're never having pot, we're never having X, we're never doing this.
mhm,
Ancestors didn't do it." Like anyone else who's impressionable. And the side effects it had on me was it was very big. Like, I had biomarker feedback things that were happening.
mm.
I wasn't able to sleep through the night. I was probably like 8%, 7% body fat. It was not great. And my wife, my fiance at the time, it was not she was doing it too with me, and, like, we saw all these physical things that we were like, "This is what we wanted," but I was having mood swings. Like, there's all these things that go into this that people just aren't aware of. Um, and basically what I was 'cause what it would lead to is if we would go to, like, the farmer's market or something and get a bag of delicious pretzels from this farmer's market that were I couldn't just have one
Right.
because in my mind, I was like, "I'm never gonna get this opportunity again." Right? It's a scarcity mindset. So if as a coach, I say, you can't eat a donut, you can't have X or Y, that person immediately goes, okay, well then if I am going to have it, I really have to make it count. Like that's why
Yeah.
I do not like cheat days. I also don't like the whole if it fits your macros thing because really it's like you're still doing something where you're trying to hit this thing, but you're also like, well, I just won't eat a few meals so then I can have this whole chocolate cake,
Right. Exactly.
right?
Yes.
So it's like it's that is disordered in and of itself, in my opinion. I'm not a doctor. It's just how I choose to view that. Um, so it's really this interesting thing because I think the big proponent people have who are against things like intuitive eating, who are against things like health at every size, technically might be, well, so okay, they can eat McDonald's if they just feel like eating McDonald's. McDonald's isn't bad or good. It's not. You could be, it's this whole thing. It, yeah, I don't know. I don't know your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, well, one of the things I think particularly about something like McDonald's is it's such an elitist mindset because some people really don't have access to, a more robust choices. Many neighborhoods don't have Whole Foods. And so to sort of say everything is bad is really, there's so much that goes into that that is so, sort of ignorant in so many ways. So I think number one, there's that. And then as an eating disorder specialist, I've spent over 10 years learning, teaching. I continue to learn and I continue to teach on the subject. If it fits your macros is completely disordered because it takes you out of your body, right? And so, like, one of the things that we can identify disordered eating is the idea that something external is controlling your choices because you have to dissociate a bit or disconnect from your own desire. Or, like you're saying, okay, fine, I really want this chocolate cake. So, therefore, I'm not actually going to eat anything else all day so I can have this chocolate cake. But it also often leads to binging because, like you're saying, also, like you restrict, you can't have the donut. And then I think about this donut for so long, then I can't control myself around it. And my body is trying to heal all of that restriction and stress. And then you binge. Um, so, yeah, I don't know if
Yeah,
that answered
no.
your question.
No, it does answer my question because I think it's a side of it that people don't understand. That's kind of why I said, like, technically, calories in, calories out is true, but there are so many other factors that go into it. So many, such as socioeconomic factors,
Right.
such as uh, environmental factors. There's just so many things that, yes, the science supports the calorie deficit, calorie surplus, but that is divorced of the idea that someone might not be able to afford to do X or Y. They might not be well informed enough to realize that they could order something same price margin off that menu and it would be fine. As in like they would still be able to see whatever their goal might be, they might be able to do that. It's just a conversation of understanding that neither is good or bad. It's just it's food and everyone needs to eat. Like everyone
Right.
needs to eat. Like it's just so hard, I think, for people to have an understanding of that.
Well, and calories in, calories out, the research could support it, right? But it doesn't give you the whole picture because what the research supports is that will cause weight loss, period. There's
Mhm.
no other, I have yet to see, and correct me if you have, see any research that shows any other, let's call it quote unquote, benefit of calories in, calories out. There's no
Oh, no.
cholesterol research, there's no heart health, blood sugar, right? There's nothing else that shows that that is effective.
No, yeah,
And so I think that's the other thing when people are like, oh, well, the research shows this. And I'm like, okay, but what else happens? Like calories in, calories out. How's your bone density? Like, what are you, are you menstruating? Where are your
yeah,
hormone markers at? Like, what's your cholesterol? There's so many other, and this is where like conflating health and thinness gets
right.
like sort of we can break it down.
Yeah, it totally can. Because I mean, I'll give you an example. I like to give examples from my own life, not necessarily my client's life, because it's always they'll know if I'm talking about them or not. For me, I cut my finger. This is maybe a year ago. I cut my finger cutting something, and I had to go to an urgent care. And I went in, it's not a doctor I normally see, and they looked at me and they were worried about my finger, and then I was like, "Yeah, I'm type 1 diabetic, so I heal slowly." And they're like, "You're type 1 diabetic? You don't look diabetic." And I was like, "What do you mean I don't look diabetic? I'm wearing like a continuous glucose monitor. I have a insulin pump. What do you mean I don't look diabetic?" Like this is this whole thing
Mm,
because the assumption is someone has to be obese to be type 1 diabetic, has to be obese to have heart disease, to be yes, technically, if someone is, there is a chance that they could, but I could also have those things. Like I could have kidney
right,
disorder from my diabetes. I could have all these complications. And I stand at 5'10", 160 pounds. I'm lean. I work, but I still have stuff inside my body that
right,
doesn't function. I have a dead pancreas. Like it's just, it is this thing where it's like, yeah, I could have someone who is super lean, super small, but their bone density is crap because they they don't they don't exercise, they don't move any mass. They are that size because they skip meals. They're not actually eating enough for, let's say they're menstruating. They're not actually eating enough of the things they should be eating to help regulate all of those things. Like it's just there's so much that goes into it. So it's not that simple.
right,
Um, yeah, it's just an interesting way to start to see that it's this scale. It's not it's a sliding scale. It's not that easy.
right, right.
Yeah. So I guess another question I might have for you is in looking at this, like, okay, so let's say someone wants to incorporate movement or mindful movement into their daily life. The reason why I'm thinking of this is um someone who maybe they had kids and they are now to a point where they've been cleared and they want to go back and they want to exercise again and they want to do this. The thing that I've seen or I've noticed is it's usually like, all right, I want to go back to doing exactly what I was doing. I don't think things like going for a walk are good enough, or I'm in the category of where I think going for a walk every day should be like your foundation before you even go
Mm,
and try and lift weights or go to the gym. Suddenly you're going like 6 days a week, but that's not sustainable.
right.
So, so it's like, how do you begin to educate someone on I know the first point you brought up was being able to separate aesthetics from athletics, but
Right.
what does it maybe look like for someone who's about to embark on this journey?
Well, I'm going to first answer your question with a question. Tell me, this could make for an interesting conversation, how you define mindful movement, because we may define it
Ooh,
differently.
ooh, I love this. I don't necessarily define it as being in a specific place, right? I don't like to look at it that way. Um, I like it to just be moving your body with the intention of just being in your body. So that could be for someone, and I've trained hundreds of clients at this point. That could be for someone that could be sitting on the rower and doing like a zone 2 row session. For someone else, it could be dancing with their kids or
Right.
going for a walk. For someone else, it could be doing some kettlebell swings in their basement with some Harry Styles blasting on the stereo, right? I like to look at it as like exercise is just the act of maybe your heart rate gets raised, maybe it gets up past the level of like 115 to 120 beats per minute, depending on the person.
Right.
So maybe you're in, if we want to get for trainer brains, like zone 2, zone 3,
Yep.
that I would put mindful movement in there. I think sprints could be maybe mindful movement, but I think it's a little more intense than what that would be. It's also auto-regulating. Like, I believe it's the awareness to know, like, my body's burnt out today. I have sprints. I'm gonna try no, I'm not even gonna try one. I'm gonna do X or Y instead, and it's still more than enough. Like, it's this level of knowing that the fact that you're showing up and you just do your warm up and maybe you do one set of everything, or maybe you just do the warm up, like, that's more than enough. It's you're at least giving yourself a chance. So that's how I define it. I'd be interested to hear how you define it.
Yeah, I really like your definition. I tend to make a distinction between exercise and movement. And part of that is a lot of the clients that I tend to work with in my psychotherapy practice, like, stop recognizing movement as beneficial, right? So people often dismiss a walk or whatever, dancing with your kids, and so I tend to think of exercise. I agree with the elevated heart rate, but I also think of exercise as structured and
Mm.
movement as less structured. So in that way, we differ. But I like your thoughts around it a lot, of like recognizing your limits. So I think of that as just mindful exercise. I guess that's where we
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
differ. But so one of the things with parents that I would do is actually have them recognize how much movement they already have in their day. Um, because if you think about, let's say, like babies, you're standing up, you're sitting down, you're changing diaper, like you are moving around your house probably a lot. You're, like rocking a baby to get them to calm down, taking them just like pushing a stroller. That's all movement, in my opinion. And so I think if we can help folks see that, it also makes the entry point a little easier. Like you actually aren't starting from zero. Um, But I think, to your point, the mindfulness around it is really important. And I think once you are cleared from a doctor, um, then actually having some structure can be helpful so that you don't overdo it. Um, and so thinking about, like, okay, what is accessible? What feels like I can be happy doing that without taking too much time away from, whatever else I want to do. Um, And so I think, but again, as you said, one of the biggest things here is to figure out what you want out of the exercise. Because I think one of the best things new parents can do is, whether it's like switching off if there's two parents or whatever, but getting that alone time to breathe is so important. And so if that can be the priority, it's also a lot easier to recognize, I need that, I want to do that, versus, oh, I want, quote unquote, my body back, but I'm so tired. Like the breath of air that you can breathe once like your child is safe, they're with another caretaker or whatever. Um, it's easier to build a sustainable habit. So I think that's really important too, recognizing what you're hoping to get.
Yeah, I think I agree with you 100%, Stephanie. I think in at least with my wife and I, when our son came into the world, it was April of 2020. We
Mm,
were quarantined with the baby. We had no idea what the world was going to be. For us, we had our little gym in the basement. I would go work out with my son, chilling in the little bassinet thing, rocking out.
mhm.
My wife would go down, and then she would have her alone time. It's something that we still right now, our sons too. We wake up in the morning, we go spend that time, whether it be meditating, doing our training plan that's structured, going going for daily walks, like a bike ride. Like there's just something so much in it. I've openly struggled with depression for my entire life, and I'm sober too. So for me, uh, fitness has become so much more than having to
Mm,
look a specific way.
yep.
I That's why, Stephanie, I'm also really aligned with what you said in the beginning of it being a mental uh for your mental health and things like that. It's so important because when you are within your body and you're aware of your body, the thoughts and ideas that pop up have a better chance of being able to pass as thoughts and ideas instead of facts. At least that's how
Yes.
I've identified it within myself and even within my clients, within my scope of practice. We talk about thoughts are thoughts, they will go. If we can do something that allows us to be within our body, we have a better chance of letting those thoughts be with us, not trying to force them away. Instead, allowing us to coexist with them and see, oh, I'm still a fully capable human. Even if I feel like I failed as a dad today, if I go for that walk, I can recognize, like, oh, wait, my son laughed a lot. Okay, sure. He threw a temper tantrum in front of everyone, but also he's two and he just doesn't know how to communicate what he wants and needs. That's not a
Right,
reflection of me as a parent.
right.
That walk or that set of push-ups or whatever, that's a chance to still show yourself, I'm fully capable even when the world is moving around me in a way I don't agree with or don't want it to be. Like,
Right.
I still have some semblance of control over self and that level of autonomy. That's just a beautiful thing to be able to have.
Yeah, I have an April 2020 baby also.
Oh, you got a quarantini. Yeah, that's
My second, but yeah, I mean, and my husband and I actually met riding bikes, I mean, through PT, but anyway, whatever. So yeah, so we have also made fitness a priority, but even in that we recognize like you need that time, you need to like have that structure for everyone's sake. And so, right, I think that's the other thing is like if you are a new parent, checking in and making a schedule makes it a lot easier to find a practice that sort of is, again, sustainable and enjoyable rather than trying to be in the middle of all the chaos and like hoping you have time to do something.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, it's just so hard, and this goes back to what you're talking about, like, I guess you called it mindful exercise, having, like, a structured thing that you're following too. Even if you're getting yourself back into it, having some sort of structured plan, because you're quite frankly, your brain isn't gonna your brain isn't gonna wanna work the way that it normally works when you're on not a lot of sleep or when you're trying to make sure that everyone's okay and fed and alive. Like, having that structure, but having flexibility within that structure
yeah.
is very important too.
Yeah. And I think the structure in the beginning can literally just be these are the days and this is the time that works. And then I can figure out what I want to do within that. When my April 2020 baby is a girl, but when my daughter was young, one time I went in the basement and during what was supposed to be my husband's bike ride, and he was like passed out on the floor. And he was like, it doesn't matter what I do during my time. This is my, hour and a half. So if I want to just take a nap when no one's bothering me, I can do that. Um, which is true also. And that like was very flexible within his, allotted or whatever time.
Yeah, I think it's just, you know what it is? When I get asked by people like, how do I be more consistent with my workouts or how do I,
Mm.
and I just always go the route, just schedule it. Just put it in your calendar. Like, schedule it well, if I don't have it, who says your body has no idea that you have written in workout for 60 minutes, just like your body has no idea how long a week is. It doesn't. I mean, yes,
Right.
technically it might realize certain things, but it has no idea. It doesn't have a structured so if you're supposed to exercise like 3 days a week, and technically you get 2 in, but then the following week you get 3 in. Wow, look at that. Your body's done 5 workouts. It doesn't recognize, "Oh, it's a new week. It doesn't really count." No, like, it's
Right.
just it's able to exist. That's really how I like to look at it, or hope people can start to look at it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the other way to do that, I always tell folks like, okay, so you have that in your calendar, 60 minutes workout. And then after those 60 minutes, write down at least one thing that you got out of that workout that you enjoyed, because that's how you're going to build why you're doing it.
Yes, Stephanie, I love that. I love that. In fact, I love it so much that that's usually what's at the bottom of all of my training plans for people.
Oh,
They have to
awesome.
come away yeah, they have to come away with at least 1 win. They have to come away with at least one thing they didn't enjoy about it, and then they have to come away with one thing they learned. So it's these 3 questions that allow someone to get a little more introspective about what they're doing, because if they're like, "I really don't like this," and every week they don't like it, it's me being able to say, "Okay, well, what do you think you would enjoy in this place? Like, do you
Right.
feel
What can
like
we
you're
do
gonna
instead?
skip it every time? Like, what can we do instead? Like, what is it you don't like about it?" Because that again, going back to, like, the empowerment, it's like, "Oh, no, 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 it's not like a one-sided thing. This is, like, your body." Like, I can love a lot of things. Like, I could do hill sprints for days. I enjoy that. That for me, I don't it sucks, but I also know, like, the benefit after I do it, like, I'm okay with it. For you, might not be your thing. So, it's just letting someone know they're able to say how they feel. Like, you're able to admit, like, "I don't enjoy like, any part of this." There has to be some level of enjoyment. You won't always enjoy it, but something that you look forward to doing at least.
Right. And that's how you build a sustainable practice.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie, this was a blast. I really enjoyed talking with you about all of these topics. If someone wanted to learn more about you or work with you, how would they go about doing that?
So my website, Intuitive Psychotherapy NYC, there's a contact form on there. You can contact me through the link in Instagram. I'm not great with my DMs, if I'm being honest, but so yeah, and on there you can contact my email and um, and then we can have a conversation about working together. Or on my website, you could just learn about me anyway.
Oh,
So
I absolutely love that. That's fantastic. And all that information will be in the show notes. So if you're listening, just click in the show notes and you'll be able to reach Stephanie. Stephanie, one question I ask everyone is when you could go back, or if you could go back to when you were first getting started in all this, and I'll let you decide whether you getting started in health and fitness or you getting started in your psychotherapy practice, what would be one piece of advice that you would like to give yourself? You don't necessarily have to change how anything went, but it would just give yourself a little bit of a heads up.
I think it would be to be more flexible. I had really rigid ideas of what things should look like. And so I think that really set me up to feel as though I failed a lot of times. And in both things, like starting my therapy practice or starting my fitness journey, is allowing flexibility. And that's also how I would figure out what I like and what I don't like, as opposed to like, this is what I should be doing, or this is what things should look like. Uh, and it's something I still struggle with, but I'm more aware of now, even. So,
Oh, I think I think we're more alike than I thought we would be alike.
yes.
I'm very much of the same recovering perfectionist mindset where it's like, yeah, this no, it has to look this way, or I'm not doing enough, or it's not right, so I should completely scrap everything, right? Um So I can really appreciate that, and I'm sure people listening to this could appreciate it too, because I know you're not the only person who ever has felt that way.
Right.
Um, yeah. So, look, thank you so much for checking out the podcast. If you
Thank
could
you
do
for
me a
having me.
favor, yeah,
Yes.
if anyone listening could do this favor, just leave a review, 5 stars. If you're coming and hearing this podcast for the first time because you're a huge fan of Stephanie and the work she does, thank you for being here. You can check out the other episodes. I've had some really fun guests on, and there's a ton of mini podcasts on there that are educational. So go check it out.
Oh, I love that.
And yeah, so thank you so much, Stephanie, again.
Thank you.